Welcome back to the channel and welcome to probably the biggest video yet here. This time I will be comparing 4 heavyweights from the rapidly expanding mid-range selection, and I really think this is where the majority of people should be spending their money, because this is where it's happening. First off, you might notice the glaring absence of a couple of cubes, the Guhong Pro and the Hudong Light. I don't really have a good excuse for not having the Guhong Pro, other than that I've never been able to find it for a good price and in the correct model locally, but I'm also not super excited to get another blocky, clacky, dense cube. I believe my QiYi MS approximates that experience and I don't love it. For the Hudong, I know it's sandy and flexible with strong magnets, and I also know that I don't like sandy cubes, so don't have that one. The cubes I do have here are the MGC Beta Maglev UV, the QiYi XT3V1 Flagship, even though I did add some repelling edge magnets, but I don't think it really needs them. And the other two that I have here are sort of substitute placeholders for the Tianma ZCube and the RS3M V5, and to some extent the RS3M. I'll explain later in their respective sections that I still think I can give a good description of those cubes though. Let me know down in the comments if you have these exact models, or the 2 cubes I don't have at all. And while you're at it, I'd really appreciate if you could give the video a like and the channel subscribe, as it would help me out greatly and I'd really appreciate it. Starting with the unboxing experience, the Beta and XT3 both give a similarly satisfactory showing. I'll just open up the boxes so you can get an idea of how that looks. So MGC Beta has a nice thick cardboard box. It's pretty nice. Comes with a card inside, and it has the accessory box and the cube. XT3V1 is pretty similar. Again, nice thick box, but this time the cards, there are 2 of them and they are both plastic, which I don't love to see. It's a bit of a waste and not great for the environment. Inside we have a strangely wide box and the cube itself. So inside these boxes, for the XT3 we get a nice fake leather bag, much like the other Tornadoes. You get a little microfiber cloth, a whole lot of cards which I won't show you just because they're not very useful, and most importantly a blank center cap, so that's very nice. The Beta does not have a blank center cap, but what it does gain is these little swappable torpedoes for the edges, and that lets you swap between repelling edge core magnets and no repelling edge core magnets. Main gimmick, pretty nice. And it does actually have a screwdriver, which is a very strange omission from the XT3, considering that all 4 of these cubes use a screw and ratchet based dual adjustment system. Anyway, bit odd. The RS3M V5 and Tianma are both a step down in quality from these 2 cubes. Both have a thin, cheap feeling outer box, and the V5 has a giant robot case inside, which you've probably seen already. And you can be the judge of whether that's a good thing or not, but personally, I don't like it. They both have screwdrivers, but neither of them have blank center caps included. Anyway, now we will jump into the meat of the video, which is the performance and feel of the cubes. If you want to jump to a specific cube, go to the description below and check out the chapters. Be sure to stick around for the end, because I will be putting up my tier list and discussing my own personal preferences. I'll start with the newest release, the MGC Beta. I have a lot of different ways to describe this cube, but for conciseness I'll stick to just 2 of them. It's a bit like a harder, hollower, and slightly blockier Tornado V4 Pioneer. That's the boring description. I also like to see it as a budget GAN 14, which sounds a bit odd, but stick with me. The hand feel is pretty similar. It has a nice grippy UV coating and flat tiles. The weight is actually only 7 grams more, so it feels not that much more heavy. The plastic feels like a slightly harder and thicker version of the plastic found in the 14, but it's still soft and comfortable. Despite the high static friction and strong magnets, which I'll talk about more later, the way the pieces interact is extremely reminiscent of the 14. It's a little bit more blocky for sure, and it has worse reverse corner cutting, but the slight clankiness, general loose feeling and turning weight feels very similar. You can feel that there's a lot of piece-to-piece contact, resulting in a smooth, glidey yet airy feeling cube that has a lot of speed. That brings me to the downsides of the cube, of which there are a couple. I briefly mentioned the high static friction, which means that the cube can feel a little bit sticky and clunky when starting up turns, but thankfully this goes away mostly with break-in. However, it's still a bit more than on a lot of other cubes, and the strong piece magnets don't help this. I needed to use the repelling edge magnets to help push through turns, avoiding the stickiness, and that ended up helping me to appreciate the light turning. And yes, we are finally at the big issue, the break-in time. If you're not patient, this cube is not for you. I'll just say it straight out. The cube goes through an identity crisis phase before blossoming into the budget GAN 14 I've been describing, and it drags you with it for 400 odd solves. It probably went through 4 different stages of horrible scratchiness due to poor edge feet molding, but if you're patient, it is definitely worth suffering through it. It needs to be used on relatively high tensions, and the compression needs to be fairly high, otherwise you run into some odd feeling clackiness and corner twists. I've lubed mine with both Angstrom lubes, XMT10 and FZ Calm. To sum up, I really like this cube, and if you like blocky, airy, glidey and very fast cubes, you'll probably like it as well. Next up we have the XT3V1. My best description for this one is that it's a very light Tornado V3, with the plastic and tactility of the V4 Pioneer, although maybe not quite the same kind of tactility. It's quite flexible, but has the harder, less buttery feeling plastic from the newer release. At just 65 grams, and with a semi-gloss finish, it may feel a little cheap to some, but personally I think it's very well built, and the frosted surface is quickly breaking in and turning glossy, much like my V3 Pioneer. Where it really differentiates itself from those cubes, however, is in the magnet calibration. It has pretty strong core magnets at a moderately small radius, paired with moderately weak piece magnets. And this is where my hot take comes in. I think this cube feels like a better Huameng TG. Both have soft and crispy plastic, and the XT3 has a hint of the TG's internal gumminess because of the magnet calibration. However, there isn't as much friction, there's no aggressive mid-turn repulsion, and the weight distribution makes the turns feel light in a very natural way. The downsides with this cube lie in how you set it up. Out of the box, it has some extreme spring noise and extreme spring feel. In fact, it's an issue when it's still in the box. It's a bit hard to capture on recording, but when tapping on the packaging box, you can feel and hear the springs making what can only be described as a springy noise. I'll play a clip now. I ended up having to break out the Lubrical Black because the gravitas I initially used on the springs wore off very quickly, but I suspect weight 5 would work a lot better. You also have to be very careful when using heavy lubes, as it's easy to give the same gummy feel as the TG. FZ Glide is also a no-go for me here because it did exactly that, and I had to wipe it out and reset it up. I'm using mine on about 3/4 of a turn tighter than stock, on compression setting 4 of 11. I'm using Lubrical Black on the core, then Dignitas, Gravitas, DNM and Calm on the pieces. When I have the setup dialed in, I really enjoy the light, bubbly turning in a similar way to how I enjoyed the Worm V9. It's flexible and forgiving with a very satisfying tactility. I'll now speed through the other two cubes, as I've already reviewed them before. You can check out those videos in the description. The Tianma I have here is not actually the one that I recommend, but the reality is that I would have modded the ZCube Ballcore version to match the magnet setup on the triple, and I would have reviewed that. That ZCube version has regular piece magnets and a very strong 8 magnet ball core, and at $15 US it offers the best price to performance ratio of all of these cubes. I've heard it's marginally more stable than a stock Tianma triple, which is to say, stable enough but could be better. It won't have the bubbly feeling of the triple with its feet magnets and repelling center rings, but it will be smooth, flexible, and fast. It retains the same crunchy corner cutting that makes the cube feel either extremely satisfying or very cheap. If you've watched my full review, you'll know I am firmly in the satisfying camp, and I wholeheartedly recommend this cube if any of those attributes appeal to you. It also feels a bit more dense and solid than the other cubes, making it almost a polar opposite in feel to the Beta, and to some extent the XT3V1. For $28, the triple is still an option if you want bumpy magnets, but the value proposition isn't quite as good. There have also been some reports of bad quality control on these new ZCube models, so bear that in mind. And finally, we move on to the old RS3M V5. This cube is absolutely notorious for being universally praised on price to performance, then literally shattering in the hands of many a cuber. I'll never own one for this very reason, but I've tried a few now and I think I can talk a little bit about what to expect. It feels like a light and hollow RS3M 2020 with the pull of a ballcore. Anyway. The classic MoYu feel means you probably won't hate it, but it's nothing special either, and you can definitely tell how thin the plastic is when solving. Performance is excellent as it turns and corner cuts smoothly, and feels a bit more forgiving than the MGC Beta. That being said, it has a plethora of issues that make it hard to recommend unless you really want that feel. We'll go from least serious to most serious. First up, the core magnets loosen over time and start to rattle and click. The plastic is very thin and you can feel the split pieces wobbling and clicking around, not to mention that there have been reports of the cube feeling bad much sooner than it should, due to the thin plastic and how quickly it wears down. Finally, the UV coating tends to peel and chip if multiple corners aren't already chipped and broken, or even just completely shattered. Any small drops have a high chance of rendering your cube useless for competition due to the brittle and thin plastic, so I just would not buy this cube. I'll now move into a little sound test so you can get an idea of what they sound like. I'll include the Huameng TG just after the XT3 and the Tornado V4 Pioneer after that, so you can just hear how similar those cubes sound. I'll sum that all up with this brilliant, high quality presentation that I've made. You have two broad categories of cube, flexible and blocky. The Beta, V5 and Guhong are blocky, while the XT3, Tianma and Hudong are flexible. Amongst those, if you want a soft feel, pick between the Beta, XT3 Flagship and Hudong, really any version, probably Beta Maglev as well. Keeping in mind that the Hudong is a little bit sandy. If you want a harder plastic feel, pick any of the other three. The Hudong is the most forgiving, but the rest are similarly good. The XT3 feels the lightest to turn, while the Tianma is the fastest. The XT3 is also the lightest by weight, while the others are sitting in the 70 to 80 gram range. I would avoid the V5 unless you really think it will suit you best because of that flimsy plastic. Now you might have noticed that I forgot to talk about the RS3M, and that's because it's a very niche cube. With all these other options out there, it's usually not worth mentioning the RS3M unless stability at all costs is desired, because, well, that's what it does really, really well. Okay, so in conclusion, for me personally, I like the XT3 best, and it just knocks out the Tianma as my third favorite cube. And I'm sort of split as to whether to put this at the very top of A tier or as the third entry in the S tier, because it's just that good. It might be a little bit inconsistent for me on some days, but just because it's so light and controllable yet very, very fast, I think I might just have to put it in the S tier today. The MGC Beta slots in just below that, and whether I'd pick it over the Tianma really just depends on my mood. They're pretty much polar opposites, yet equally excellent. The RS3M V5 would go about where the 2020 was if we ignore the durability concerns. If we don't ignore them, then it would be off the chart, don't buy it. The 2020 is stopped from being ranked higher because of its weight and performance, but the V5 would be there because of its thin plastic and otherwise quite boring feel. Anyway, feel free to share your opinions down in the comments below, and that's it. I really hope you found this video useful, and thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. Please let me know if there's any content you'd like to see, and I'll do my best to make it happen. Make sure you're subscribed so you can see when I upload though. And with that, see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.